music is so universal, especially Balinese music, and it comes from, everyone has the beating, the sounds of it. It's all about life, listening to each other, not being an individual. There's no ego. If you put your ego within the Balinese orchestra, it's chaos. And that's just a representation of what the Balinese philosophy is, that you work together, you have compassion towards community members.
I'd like to ask the question as to music being a universal language, why in the capitalist system is music or artists undervalued? Everyone loves listening to music, but in terms of the value of artists, the value of being able to create, argue it's very undervalued in this society. And I don't know, I'm all for solutions, but I can't help. Look, I'll be honest, people might think I'm quite radical, but an idealist, but unless you address capitalism, classism, we're going to have these same conversations for the next 20, 30 years.
We talk of the live music or the music industry being self-sustaining in a free market, and we've talked of the importance of the economy, but let's be honest, the resources and rewards have never, ever been evenly distributed. And I believe that the underlying inequities, which are definitely the result, this is in our strategic plan, just by the way, that goes to government, that are the result of colonial, capitalist, ableist, racist, classist, sexist and ageist cultures and structures have now only been exacerbated, both in the pandemic and of late. And I mean, you'd say this could have been said 10 years ago as well, but I now, in my position, know that this can no longer be ignored. And that's my job, to try and address it.
I know that often when we see reporting about the health of music, we see the term music industry, and it's not to discount that, but just to show the kind of the dichotomy here, we hear statistics such as, and this is from the Music Victoria strategic plan, but also Creative Victoria, sing along, $195 million of exports in 2019, 316,000 people with primary employment in creative and cultural industries in Victoria in 1 year, 2021, 2022. And this figure's increasing as well. So we go, yay us, we're in a very healthy city and state for creative music making. But then the stark difference, the fact that 69% of musicians don't cover the cost of their artistic practice, that 70% have to supplement their income through pursuits that are outside of their music practice. And God help us, 51% are living underneath the poverty line. This is not a bill of health, folks.
The health of our creators is also extremely important and disproportionately affected in terms of mental health statistics. So, yeah, the very people we rely on are also the ones that are often struggling the most.
A statistic that I've always wanted to see is, out of all of the arts budget, how much is spent on concrete? I don't want to rip down the building that we're sitting in now, but in the future, can we at least know how much is being spent building?
Most prevalent resource in the world. Anything else?
I know, but in the arts budget, I want to know that figure. Going forward, I want to know how much is being spent on buildings, because, well, I haven't finished, because I'm going to do a what if. What if we got all of that money and we gave it to something which I like the idea of, which is, out of all these people here, everyone knows that eventually the people who are doing all the work in a band or whatever it is burn out. And if we wanted to support one group of people, I would like to support, I don't know how to do it, it's just an idea. I'd like to support those people who are actually doing the work inside those small groups or whatever it is. And we could just get the concrete budget and give it to them.
But on a macro level, the Department of Health, Department of Arts, from following up with all the COVID period, must understand that the arts were a very big part of the healthcare of people, listening to music and watching movies and experiencing art in every form possible. So that is a tangible thing that can be quantified. And if you are healthy, you're not draining on the government and on the resources. So a bigger part of funding should be, is a proactive way of stopping people straining the system is by making them healthy. And to make them healthy, they need art as their main medicine.
In Western culture, basically, people just understand music is just an entertainment. That's how they think, which is really wrong. Music actually can help very much in mental health. So rather than medication, it could be musication. So could be new thing we can try, because before giving people who are suffering from mental, and a lot of other things, music can really help.
As an African person, African music is classified as something fun, make people happy, jump around. And it's not can be sophisticated like other music. I just so interested that there is the music that value, that make absolutely respected. How can you change that as someone from academic?
We tend to be more reactive, although we are actually trying to respond and feed back into policy bodies, support with research and argument, and listen to voices about what should be done. I think the question, or rather the frame of value, is one we can help with. Not because it's my theme, others have raised it, about whether music is valued simply economically, whether we consider it in terms of, obviously we value it personally, aesthetically, but we also need to work harder, I guess, to think about how its value is demonstrated by the support for musicians, but also, again, making space for different types of music, even allowing different ways of not just categorising music from Africa as fun or whatever, lots of different ways of incorporating it.
I'm a singer-songwriter, ex-student of the Bachelor of Music at Melbourne Polytechnic. And of course, I just finished and I'm sort of investigating the industry, okay, where I can show my music. I have a lot of music and I want to show it, I want to perform more. And it's just it's very difficult to, where do I apply? It's so difficult. Where is the festival that my music will fit? And I feel like we're definitely, a lot of people here, it must be in the same position. And I feel like, what are we doing in terms of how in many of those festivals, it's more than 400 festivals annually, I think, in Australia. And why there is no an incentive to have more of the world music in those festivals and just have one big world music. If those festivals have an incentive to have, I don't know, maybe 20% of the artists or 10% of the artists, because at the end of the day, Australia is a multicultural country. It's not just hip hop or jazz or pop. This needs to be done. We need to have an incentive in festivals. Festivals are huge here. People go to festivals every year. There's a lot of money in there. And I feel like there's a lot of artists that still don't have a place to play on those festivals.
Your comment and your question is very timely. Because just last year, Music Victoria and MAV established a partnership around an award called the MAV Diasporas Award. The future vision that we have for that award is that this award then is able to showcase the nominations or the people that self-nominated to in that award as embedded in the festivals that you've just mentioned. In addition to that, my co-CEO Andy has been hopping on for years about establishing some sort of platform or an app that gives access to our community so that they can see what festivals are out there, know the process that they can actually go through to apply for a space in there. And as we observe the data from that space, then organizations such as MAV and Music Victoria can actually go in and advocate for that space and that demand.
Similarly, I think it's everyone in this room's job, including mine, to call it out when we see it and to send them an email and make that complaint publicly if you want to, behind the scenes if you want to, help them in that journey directly to the festival. When they announce a lineup, let them know what you think. It's just happened with Blues Fest in a different context, but it can have a really big powerful impact really quickly. And I'd also say that most of the festivals in this country are commercially run. So until our audiences are demanding it, like we now look at organic food and fast fashion and we make better choices, I think that's where we've got to get music to go, we want to make better choices about the music and festivals and events we're enjoying and going to.
If we think about the recently launched Revive policy, which is very democratic in its ambition, a place for every story and a story in every place, if that's not a misquote, that raises a question about the landscape of music and other forms of creativity. And the pressing questions that strike me about musicians in particular, migrant musicians and others, is not just a question of aesthetics and sound, it's a question of making a living. It's a question of your freedom to both perform the music that perhaps evinces your identity and heritage, but also a freedom to do other things, to be not bound by an expectation that you are only going to perform Irish music or Zimbabwean music, whatever.
I want the tension between ensuring that you pursue music because your culture was being erased isn't at odds with pursuing a career that pays your bills. Those things should happen together.
It's a full-time job applying for funding. So this is where I have an issue, you know, like because then you don't have time to be creative. And I mean, at the moment, I work for the Boite. I actually get paid to write grants. And before that, I was an artist. Nobody paid me to write grants, and I never, you know, half of the time I didn't get them.
It's hard to explain to people what I do often, and it is hard to fund some of the projects I do.
Tiny eggs splitting.
Sometimes it's easier for people to understand why you would want to do traditional music, and you know, that is in some ways it can be easier to get people excited about something that sounds a bit exotic. And some of the projects I do, we're just trying to find a language for these experiences.
We're talking about things and value that isn't solid. It's not something you can quantify. It's not something that you can often, and that becomes very difficult to communicate to government bodies and communicating value. Even though we all know it has value, and we're kind of preaching to the choir in this space, right? We're all artists, we're all musicians. I wanted to ask the question, how do you communicate the value of something so kind of soft and fuzzy in a space that is often wants solid evidence? How do you go about actually doing that, Simone, or anybody who's been successful in that?
We're trying to find a way to do it, and government's on board, like the whole Creative Victoria, there's a whole platform of reporting that's trying to capture life-changing moments, you know, and it's a challenge and it's something researchers are looking into. But when you're talking to government, ultimately you talk their language. So that's why we're talking economics and numbers and concrete.
With an arts project, with music project, community education and events and on any kind of project, you need to first think, this is what we do. Think about, okay, who is our audience? What do we want to bring a personal story, which is, I know a lot of art is, and it's usually, it very often is a personal story, personalized, and then it's really difficult to sell it. It is an industry, unfortunately, we are talking about surviving in that world. So, or do you want to see what is need, what is a demand, and what you can offer in return. Talking to government, if it's a local government, they all have their strategic plans available, and you just look at their strategic plan and reflect that, speak that, and it's like, oh, great, and it's a great tick for them too, because you solved the problem. You know, you already, it's like, oh, great, we met that deliverable is done. Wonderful. So someone else did that project for them. You got the funding, they got their deliverables, and it's a it's a happy ending. Or if it's a broader community, then you look for partnerships perhaps, and Yeah, it's always, I think a lot of organizations, a lot of government bodies, other institutions are very open to partnerships.
We haven't mentioned about the collaboration, which is really very important. And I think is one of the, to share music, that what, the community is to create community through music. And I think it's very important that we find our allies to collaborate with us as a multicultural artist or younger people who want to. Its collaboration is so more important, and I think it one thing that we can break, to bring all these things that they see like aliens, music, whatever it is. It's really good to be able to unite people through that.
A few years ago, I had the opportunity of mentoring some young adults, and they mentioned that they learned more about politics in the music that they listened to than the education system. And I find that there's a lot more value in developing critical thinkers and social entrepreneurs through arts and culture.
There is a great deal of emphasis on supporting youth music, and I think that's incredibly important. And you don't get renewal and you don't get novelty, I mean, in its best sense, if you don't bring in the younger artists. But this is something I've talked with Gemma about in the past. Older musicians need support too, and I think there are people here who might agree with me on that, not only because they bring experience and gravity to what you might call the scene, to the industry, also because they still need to eat and keep a roof over their heads. And if you have in this community selected a life where your music is not only your art but also your means of living, you're unlikely to have a vast superannuation, for instance. And those people, as part of the community, deserve support, but also their capacity to contribute artistically is still really valuable and really important and ought to be supported as well.
If you want to bring young people, they need to be actually nurtured. They need to be absolutely support in financial, because a lot of them are really, they lost it because they're just struggling. They do that and then they left alone. And so it's really important that, what Teresa said, to have young people, but also it need to have a very important, they need to support that can keep them motivated. Otherwise they just fall, it's hard.
Education for me and the sort of the power of working with young musicians is where it's at. And Jonathan and I know very well at the moment just how complex and difficult it is to keep a music program such as ours alive at the moment. It's a remarkable music course, and multicultural music is at the core of what it is that we deliver. And I think maybe if there were a question in this, I would address it to Simone. And I wonder if an organisation such as yours could or would in some way take a closer look at what it is like that a course like ours offers. Because I like to say we catch the young musicians that fall through the gaps, and yet that's unrecognised. It's not caught. Aside from word of mouth, nobody knows about us.
I'm more than happy to promote it. Tell me all about it and then I'll fall in love with it and then I can't help myself.
It's a deal.
What if it doesn't have to take 20 years for a Tamil kid growing up in the southeastern suburbs to dance the tarantella or feel the strings of a bouzouki in his hand or to find his Middle Eastern violin teacher? What if a Tamil kid growing up in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne didn't just have to be fortunate enough to go to school that's well resourced with a great music program, or just happened to accidentally be next door to a great maestro, but could actually have equal opportunity to learning and being exposed to that world?
So we have the town square in the heart of Carlton,
And I open to you, get in touch with me or through Zulia, and let's talk about how we can continue in this partnership to open up that space. And really, because when I heard that gamelan last week, when I heard Leo and Vinod play a few weeks before that, all of these different ways of activating that space, it broke down the barrier. People came through the gate and peeped in the theatre. We don't want to be an institution on that street that people don't feel they can access. Yeah, something that interfaces us with the street. So let's imagine it together and let's talk.
There is a connection that everyone can gain from joining the gamelan and learning to be one instrument when you're actually 30 instruments. That's the key.